All right. I'm Denise George, and this is Janine Fales. We're from the Los Alamos Master Gardeners, and we're here to present plant selection as one of the sessions for the Sustainable Landscape Design class. There's a lot of material that we have to cover, and we request that you save your questions for the end. And also for the people that are on Zoom, would you please just put your questions in the chat and we'll deal with them as they come through.
Can they hear okay? Abby?
Okay,
Okay.
for the people coming in, would you sign in over there? And if you have a moment, take one of the Post-it notes and put your favorite and least favorite plant on it and paste it up there for us. And for those of you who are in the Zoom, if you would like to do that and put that into your chat, we'll add them at the end of the discussion. Oh, okay. All right, so we're going to start out this session with a little bit of review. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what's called a design aesthetic. And we're going to cover what you need to consider for your plant selection. After that, we're going to talk plants, lots of plants. And we will end with a re-landscaping example. So if you remember at the beginning of the classes, we went through a site plan. A site plan is basically a blank slate. So it's got your house and the blank landscape area available to you. Then from that blank slate, we came up with a concept plan. If you started out with your blank slate, then you identified the microclimates of different areas and associated with each area, its various uses. And then from that, we came up with a landscape plan. So we think, oh, great, now comes the fun part. We get to select plants. But wait, where do we start? What garden style fits your vision? I have two examples, but you might have your own idea of what your aesthetic is. You may just want a whole garden full of roses, or you might want to have a whole garden full of particular color plant. These are two very common styles that you see pretty much everywhere. And this is adapted to the Southwest though. So we call this the Southwestern English design. This example shows or provides lots of variety of fragrances, of texture, of form, color, pollinator attractants, and it's beautiful through all seasons. Now you have to remember, you don't have to have the same design aesthetic in each area of your yard. You might want to have an English design in some area close to your backyard or close to a window where you want to be able to look out and see this beautiful, colorful area. And then maybe you want to transform into a Southwestern natural design, or maybe you want this for your whole yard. Now, the Southwestern natural design, to me, is less busy. It focuses mostly on native plants. It's visually, to me, it's visually calming. It's a pleasant place to be in. Has less variety and probably a little bit less maintenance than the English style. Both Judith Phillips, from which we took these pictures, and Lauren Springer, from which we took the pictures in the previous slide, have plans and plant lists that are sensitive to our climate. And they both include natives and adapted species. See the resource pages and also look at the example books that we put out on the table for lists of website suggestions also. Okay, so how do we select a plant? Now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. You should plant what you like, but it has to grow here. Okay, palm trees are not a good choice for New Mexico. Plant what suits your desires. What do you want? Do you want to attract wildlife? Do you want beautiful views? Do you want to engage your senses? Do you want it to smell wonderful? Do you want to feed your family? All the time you have to worry about meeting your budget, your money budget and your space and all the other resources that you have at your disposal. One thing you might want to do, keep in mind as you're choosing plants, you want to group them according to their needs, soil, sun, and water. You want to consider the height, form, color, bloom time, bloom duration, texture within the area topography. That means it's going to have to be on a slope. You want to consider that. If it's flat, you want to consider what's in front and what's behind so you can see everything. You can use pre-planned or customize an existing plan, or you can just do it all from scratch yourself. Don't be afraid to experiment and relocate and rehome and remove as needed. You want to think about starting with trees because the trees are going to be the focused area of your plan. And then you might think about shrubs next because they're the next most eye-catching kind of part of your landscape. And then you then fill in with perennials and annuals and things. You want to be flexible. You can use advice of respected nursery experts. A lot of the nurseries in the area have been in business a long time and their advice is invaluable. Or you can ask a master gardener, okay, or our extension agent who is also in the back of the room. Vendors like High Country Gardens sell pre-planned gardens for various desires. For example, if you wanted to just attract pollinators, they have a garden just ready for you. You can use your existing plan from the book or from the internet and customize it for your area. It is always best to select a plan from our region. For example, go to Plant Select or High Country Gardens or books. Okay, so we have these different areas, and each area has a set of considerations. It tells you how much sun this particular area gets. It can tell you how much wind it has. It has existing environment, soil quality. All of you have obviously, by this point, taken your soil samples and sent them off to be analyzed. And also, if you have any vegetation that you want to keep, you know what, that it's there. The topography is very important. It can be sloping or flat. Slopes are wonderful because it's a way of collecting water to the places that you want it to go. And also add some interest. You have to worry about potential pests. Most of us have insects and some kind of mammals, deers, rabbits, gophers, or squirrels, and we almost all have some birds that we either want to attract or keep from eating all of our food and fruit. And always in New Mexico, you have to worry about fire safe practices. So you have to worry about what you're planting close to your house. Make sure all of your selections are in order and coordinated, or have fire safe practices. Okay. All right. So then we have to worry about our plants that we're going to put in this area. It's going to tell us how much water it needs. It's going to tell us how much sun it needs. It's going to be either tolerant of exposure of hot and drying wind or not. And it might either attract pests or be resistant to certain pests. So the trick for that is to match the area with what the area provides with what the plant needs. All right, so maybe we've made our list and we've got in our minds exactly what we want to plant. And then we're wandering through the nursery and we see this plant that is beautiful. So how do you select just the right plant? Well, you need to decipher the label. And maybe some of you know how to do this, but I'm going to go through it kind of quickly. The labels will tell you how much sun the plant needs. It will tell you how much water it wants. It will tell you, now this is really important because when you plant stuff, we tend to plant too many things in too small of a space. So this tells you how big it's going to be when it's mature. It'll tell you what season it blooms. That's important if you want to bloom through the whole spring, summer, fall. You know, you might not want to have all spring blooming plants. It tells you what zone it is, so it'll tell you whether or not you tolerate the cold winters we have here. It'll tell you the color. Usually you can tell that from the picture, but I don't know. Sometimes they tell you that also. But also, don't give up there. Get your reading glasses on and look at the little tiny print because it's got lots of extra information back there. It will tell you warnings, like maybe if you have pets, maybe you don't want this plant because it's toxic. Sometimes it will give you planting instructions. If it's a vegetable, it will tell you how long you have to wait till you can actually eat what you planted. But the one thing that is missing from most labels and is really important for us is whether or not this plant is tolerant of alkaline soils. Because most of the pHs, I think we talked about that last week, the pH of most of our soils here is sitting somewhere around 8. Okay. Oh, and also it might tell you, or you might have to research it, if this thing is particularly attractive to deer or if it's somewhat deer resistant. There's no such thing as a deer-proof plant. Okay, then I'm turning this over to Janine for a while, and we'll be doing this for back and forth.
Okay, I'm Janine Fales. I've lived in this town less time than Denise and her husband, but for quite a while. A couple of things. If you've come in and you don't know what those things on the wall are, those are your least and favorite plants. There are some Post-it notes if you want to do that. We have some resources over on the table. We have some Plant to the Southwest catalogs in the back. So I get to talk about the fun stuff, which thank you very much, Denise. But first, I just want to say, what's a plant's purpose, right? The plant is trying really hard to survive. So, and to reproduce. That's what plants do. They try to survive and reproduce within their time frame. So our job is to try to maximize its chance of doing that. There's lots of nuances, so that's just sort of where we'll leave it. There's a lot of terms that you'll hear. Woody perennials, hopefully any tree or shrub we plant will be a perennial. If not, then we just wasted a lot of money. Trees and shrubs can be deciduous or evergreen. The structure usually persists in the winter. For example, apples might need a cross-pollination in order to produce fruit. And so if you're going to put in an orchard, you need to be sure that you know what you need in the neighborhood to make fruit. And I don't know how many people in here have fruit trees, but some things like apricots, I think we're getting them more often, but it used to be about once every 5 years you would get apricots because they freeze out in the spring. And typically trees and shrubs are pretty long-lived, at least we hope so. Herbaceous perennials die back in the winter, come back in the spring. They might produce seeds during their growing season. They might not. Often they need pollination to produce seeds, and they could be short-lived or long-lived. Biennials like hollyhocks, don't plant them and expect to flower the first year because they'll put roots down the first year, put the plant stalk up the next year, and then they die back, but they reseed really well. Annuals is anything else, okay? Technically, petunias are a tender perennial, but definitely not here, right? If you have petunias outside, they're not going to make it after Sunday, right? Pollinators, well, so they say, which is why I picked 40 pounds of tomatoes today. But pollinators can be a self-pollinating plant. It can be wind pollinated. It can be insect pollinated, which is why we want to invite the insects in. Birds, mammals, and even humans can pollinate. If you have a poor sweet corn crop, it's probably because the wind hasn't. Every one of those hairs that comes out the top, every piece of silk makes a kernel of corn. And so if you want to hand pollinate, take the tassel, use a paintbrush, you can just, sort of imitate the wind, but that's how you get the corn kernels, which is why if they get cross-pollinated with another type of corn, it might not taste too good because you're actually eating the corn. So pollinators are important. I've not been stung by any of them. in the many that I have in my yard. And so please, please, please invite them in, both in what you plant and how you treat your yard. Okay, plug for the demonstration garden. Anyone not know about the demonstration garden? A lot of the people in here are master gardeners, so the demonstration garden is across the street from the Mesa Public Library and next to the Judicial Center. It's been the site of many a Eagle Scout project, and actually people have worked off their hours for community service there as well. So not that anyone in this room would ever need community service hours, but if you ever did, or if you know someone, we've had people do their hours at the garden. We took it over in 1995. It was planted under Solveig Polinick, who was extension agent around 90. I think she actually became agent maybe a little bit past that, but the garden, I have articles from the Monitor where they were doing things in the garden in 1990. All the photos that you'll see, I'm very proud of this, are either from Denise's yard, my yard, or the demo garden, okay? So there's a plethora of plants there, lots of things to see. We've gone from about 80 plants to over 475, and we have a database that you can use. It is for the public, okay? It is not professionally maintained. There are weeds. There are plants that have died or are dying. There are things that need pruning. It's all volunteer hours. And so when you walk through, say hi, ask us questions. But that we do it out of love from our hearts. We also have a smaller garden, more recently acquired in White Rock, across from the visitor center, across the road by the old McDonald's. And that one's also maintained by the Los Alamos Master Gardeners. I just wanted to give you a very quick, here's our website, lamgonline.org. You can search the plant database. And so I'm just going to buy various things. I'm going to show, okay, we have a part of the garden called Industrial Strength. There's actually a brochure from the Extension Office called Industrial Strength Plants. Say search, and you come up with the plants in that area. And I picked this one because it's Denise's. And if you click the details, it will give you more pictures probably of the plant and things like this yarrow, that's its number, low water use, full sun, it's a perennial. Its common name is moonshine yarrow, and it blooms in the summer. So there's a lot, and this you can do on your phone. So if you're standing there in the garden and say, I wonder what this is. At the entrance to the garden, we have a map. And so you can figure out, okay, I'm in Industrial Strength. Let me see what this plant is, and I'll take a note of it. Okay, trees. They are absolutely the anchor of a landscape. What else do we know about trees? Probably the biggest investment you're going to make, a single investment you're going to make. Usually people plant trees for shade, baby fall interests. Sometimes, you know, if I could get a flowering dogwood to go here, I would plant one as a specimen tree, but doggone it, they're understory and they like acidic soil. So, you know, but you might have a specimen tree. You might want to plant trees for food, for yourself or for animals. Recreation, I did grow up in Michigan and we had lots of oaks that could handle it, but I didn't get a tree fort. But if you want to build a tree fort for your child or yourself or a tire swing, what tree you pick will make difference. And finally, you're going to see this on all my slides just because I'm not really that nostalgic, but you might plant something because it reminds you of home. I mean, I love the yellow aspen and the yellow cottonwood, but I really love the red of my red maple that's in my yard. So selection criteria, again, deciduous evergreen, mature, height and width is really important, right? It's very expensive for you, both, morally and cost-wise, to take out a full-grown tree because it's outgrown its area. I've done it. We had a cottonwood in our front yard. I don't know who in the 60s thought that cottonwoods were a good tree to plant in White Rock, but they love every drop of water that hits the ground. They have very shallow roots, and so everyone in my cul-de-sac who hasn't replaced their driveway has a cracked driveway from their cottonwood tree. When we took it down, I started getting cottonwood trees in my backyard coming up from the roots. So you don't really want to have to go through that with the tree that you've selected. Okay, so mature height and width are important. How fast it grows. Yeah, if you look at the brochure that I've, or the circular that I've mentioned down here, fast growing trees have weaker wood, slow growing trees like oaks have stronger wood. So it's kind of a balance. Locusts are pretty, there's a locust that's a pretty fast growing, the Shade Master locust, that doesn't have all that trash coming, all the pods and stuff. So, so where you put it is important. I was told recently when we've been practicing this, a lot of homes were lost during Cerro Grande because they had evergreen trees really close to their house and they had dried up needles in their gutters. Okay. I tried to tell that to my neighbor. They still have an evergreen growing around their roof, but I tried. Fertility, again, if you're planting fruit, you have to worry about that. Debris is probably one of the ones that I would say really pay attention to. If you don't want to maintain, maybe you shouldn't put in a tree, but because it will drop fruit if it's a fruit tree, it will drop pods if it's a locust tree, it's going to drop leaves, it's going to drop cones. Just make sure you don't put it on top of your house, so it's dropping it there. On your sidewalk, where people, you don't want on your car. You don't want apricots falling on your car. Pollen considerations, this is near to my heart because I was here 7 years before the juniper said, I am going to make you sick. And so juniper trees, I've probably had about 5 in my yard. I have none in my yard now, but there are pollen considerations are so, I'll say severe, but Albuquerque has banned all mulberries and all cypress trees. You cannot buy them and plant them within the city limits of Albuquerque. They have, you can't buy male juniper trees. And there's also some restrictions on cottonwoods and poplar trees. Worry about the root system, like I told you about the cottonwood, how it spreads and how much time you're going to take to maintain it. Dr. Curtis Smith, who's a retired extension specialist, said a tree should never outgrow its site, yet it must be large enough to fulfill its purpose, right? That is the problem, or that's the conundrum with cheap trees. And recently, because I reread things for this talk, if a tree is native someplace with acidic soil, it might not grow as big here. So I just recommend that circular. All right, here are 3 of my favorite trees from the demo garden. The first is autumn purple ash, has nice shade. It's what you expect out of a deciduous tree, has beautiful fall color. And yeah, the leaves fall off in the fall. So the one in the middle, I wasn't familiar with until the demo garden. It's a cockspur hawthorn. Now, hawthorns, just so you all know, most of them have thorns, right? And so if you have children, you might not want to have a tree that's very thorny, but this one's kind of a small tree. It tolerates our alkaline soils well. It kind of grows sideways, so it's kind of a beautiful specimen tree. It has beautiful flowers that the pollinators like, and it has fruit that is persistent. So it doesn't fall off and get all over your drive. And the Austrian pines, I put this one in. I don't know if this particular tree is one of them, but we planted from the Forest Service pine trees that look like pencils. This thing's probably 30 feet tall. Does have very nice big pine cones. You have to worry about them on the path. This is down at the western end of the garden. But it is a pine tree that tolerates being limbed up. And so, you know, some like spruce don't really like you to cut them up and have space underneath them. Austrian pine says, it's okay. And it tolerates our soil. It's a good tree, I think. All right, here's an example from the garden. So everyone, we all make mistakes, right? And we'll talk about how we're going to remedy this. But when we put in the casita, if you're at all thinking about the demo garden, the casita was put in storage for us, but it was put in as an example of fire defensible space. So the casita is our house at the demo garden, okay? So we planted around our house fire defensible space. So this tree probably was put in around 2004. I'm guessing this picture is from around 2008, maybe. And it's a hawthorn. It's called a Kansas hawthorn. Has nice, it is spiked. It has nice fruit. It's low water use. It grows slowly. Anyone want to guess what happened as it grew? Here it is just a couple of weeks ago, and it's been pruned a little bit already. So the branches are now over our house, right? Which is not what we want to demonstrate. So we're going to have to prune this up a little bit more. Gosh, you see the path in the front? That thing was covered with hawthorns. And that was the gutter, okay? So the gutter is full of hawthorns, full of leaves. We do have a water catchment at the bottom, but this isn't acceptable to demonstrate a tree near a home. So after 20 years, and just recognize a lot of the things you'll see in the garden are 20 or 30 years old. So non-persistent fruit, so it gets in the gutters, it gets on the path, but we will fix this. Typically, you don't want to do a lot of pruning to your trees because you should get the form and the size that you want and not have to force it into to some other thing. Shrubs, okay, I consider shrubs like little trees. Unlike cats aren't little dogs, which is a whole different part of Angela's life and mine. So why do you put shrubs in? You might do it for privacy. You might do it to define an area. I've seen a lot of people put like a row of roses between as a fence line between them and their neighbors. Seasonal shade, I actually have a row of 3-leaf sumac, which people in Ohio and Michigan would not plant a sumac, but I have planted on purpose, 3 of them. During the summer, they shade my western facing bedrooms. In the winter, the leaves are gone. The sun, I get the solar gain in the winter time. So you can do something like that. And they can supply the life cycle needs of some insects and pollinators, and the rest are about the same. Same sort of considerations. Here we have, not that we're biased, here we have a rugosa rose, and let me tell you, they are one of the most spectacular smelling roses. It's an old rose form. They have so many thorns on them that you have to really wear gloves. And then the one on the top, and they make huge hips, and the one on the top is our wild rose at the garden, which is spectacular with hips right now. Okay, shrubs. Here's 3 from the demo garden. Now, the Apache plume at the demo garden is not that little thing. I just took that off the database, but it's native. It has great texture. It has like feathery things on it. The pollinators love it. Very low water, let me tell you, very low water. The one in the middle is a Korean spice viburnum, smells spectacular in the springtime. Nice flowers, nice fruit, and nice fall color. And sorry, I'm using spectacular too much. The bear grass, I took over this part of the garden this year, and it looks a little bit like a yucca, but it's actually a grass. It put up a spike. The pollinators were all over that thing. And that picture up there is a pollinator that I've asked 4 people what it is, and no one's told me yet. It's a black and orange. The bee person said it's a wasp. So, but it was covered with these white flowers, and the pollinators loved it. So, how to plant trees and shrubs. Stop for just a second. The shade tree circular also tells you how to do this, but in case you haven't done it, or in case you haven't been successful at it, it's in here for your consideration. Prepare your site. Now, because we're in an urban area, the circular suggests that if you're going to plant a tree, that you till, amend at least 8 to 12 inches deep, even if your plant that you're planting is smaller than that, because you want to get the aeration back into the soil that was compacted. Dig a hole, check for drainage. We were joking when we were talking about this. Fill it with water, come back in 3 days, and you'll see how much drainage you have. But seriously, drainage can be a problem. So yeah, and then there's some other steps that you can go to, but you have to water. You have to water trees, folks. Until they get established, even once they're established, trees need water. If you're a visual person, this is from the University of Minnesota, and you'll have access to these, I believe, and so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Perennials, again, you can have a theme garden, you can have, butterfly garden, or a, I don't know, pollinator garden or rose garden. You might plant for fragrance. You might plant just for beauty. That's not necessarily fragrance. Like a lot of hybrid teas don't really have a lot of fragrance, but they have beauty. You might want to say, I want a really dynamic canvas. I really want to see it, different plants at different time of the year, and just fill my soul with that loveliness that is coming through my window or as I step outside. And a lot of the stuff is the same there. Form is important though. So leaf color and leaf texture, you'll have to worry about. And is it upright and like flowy, or is it a really tight, compact form? Does it clump? Is it a ground cover? How does it spread? And how much maintenance? Sorry, Barb is talking about maintenance in a couple weeks, and so all this is how much maintenance. Oops, this is a picture from Denise's yard. This is a cluster of bees, and we think maybe they clustered on that to sleep. I saw this in my squash plants, the squash flowers this year. Just a whole bunch of bees just hanging out. But anyway. All right. And there is a hollyhock and a Maximilian sunflower. Again, these are from the demo garden. Starting at the upper left, we have some hyssop, some daffodils, daylilies, oriental lilies, penstemon, Missouri primrose. I'm going to pause at the beautiful cone flowers that were loaded with butterflies this year. The one next to that, the red, that's a pine leaf penstemon. That thing is very hardy, doesn't like a lot of care, and spreads like crazy, flowers a long time, and is an evergreen. And it's deer resistant. There we go.
Yeah.
Well, we have it up at the demo garden, and it has spread all over, and usually deer take out a lot of things. So they like other things in our garden better than.
Yeah.
if there's other things around that are tastier, it will leave it alone.
But because it's green in the winter.
Oh,
they
okay,
come
okay, there you go. Next to that, we have some lavender. Above that, we have peonies, which are a favorite of mine as well. They smell spectacular. And that one below the daffodils is a pincushion pink. So, all right, all these are at the demo garden. More from the demo garden. Ground covers, that's a speedwell. The tall one, that's a rattlesnake master. And if I need to come up with a botanical name, I can, but that's a new plant for me this year. Puts up this really tall spike. We'll see what happens next year. Again, going to the right, we have some Bellasperma or ice plant. That little tiny thing, that's a rock plant. That's a grass leaf mat daisy, and see how the flower is bigger than the plant. Some blue avena grass, some white sage. The one in the middle, the thing on the bottom are creeping gold buttons. So that's a rock garden plant. What's above it? Any guesses? It is a dwarf ponderosa pine. It is about this big. And let me tell you something about dwarf. Okay, so when you get a dwarf tree like a pine, it tells you how big you can expect it to be at 10 years. But people, it doesn't stop growing, right? So it might be a foot at 10 years, but at 40 years, you know, it's gonna maybe keep growing. So I'll probably have to move it, but I just thought it was cute. Mormon tea has, you know, interesting texture, and the berries are down in the depth of the plant. Kind of grass is that? Switchgrass. Grasses are nice for winter interest. Above that is a variegated vinca, which is one of the few things I can tell you grows in shade. And I see some mouths dropping. Yes, that's at the demo garden. And we can maybe arrange if you want to get a clipping. Okay. Perennials. Annuals, again, is everything else. People plant them sometimes for fragrance, just sometimes for pots, right? I want to have a pretty pot in my front yard. You can plant them to distract pests or attract pests, right? So how many people have heard plant marigolds with tomatoes? And I'm not sure what marigold does, but that's a common, I think it is to keep the pests from getting on the tomato. I this year read plant nasturtiums with your pumpkins for squash bugs. Now my pumpkin took over the space and the nasturtiums didn't really come up, but I tried. So, and dill, which is what this is a swallowtail caterpillar form. And yeah, dill is a good one as well. What I do for my tomato hornworms is I have a datura moonflower that they love, and they become hawk moths, which is not a bad, insect to have. They're a pollinator too. So I moved my tomato hornworms to my front yard, let them go after the datura, and life is good. Spread, let me tell you, I have this lovely hillside garden, terrace garden. I had so many petunias and marigolds, thank you very much, from the sensory garden, which is above it. I let them grow. Honestly, I think the gophers prefer those plants to the other plants, so I was okay. Rocky Mountain bee plant is the only one. I have it in my yard. This is not pictures from my yard, but the photos Erin Rinker. It is a great pollinator plant. And in addition to the pollinators, right now, my songbirds are eating the seeds. Okay, so it's a wild one though, right? So it seeds wherever it wants. It can be 6 foot tall. It can be 2 foot tall. I just let it do what it wants because I don't have a formal garden, but there will be some at the demo garden next year. Petunias and nasturtiums. You can eat nasturtiums. Okay, we're gonna quickly go over some.
Okay, well, I have to take you away from some of the beautiful pictures, I'm sorry. But I know a lot of us are interested in fruit. I'm not gonna read this slide to you because the information is all there and you could read it yourself. It's all from the Agricultural Center in Alcalde. And again, with all kinds of fruit, a lot of it here in our climate, because of late freezes and so on, it's dependent on, you may not get what you think. So look for things that are plants, particular trees that have late bloom varieties. And I think all of these on the list are late bloomers and that are also self-fertile. So you don't have to plant 2 trees. The other thing that's mentioned on this slide are the fact that you can get semi-dwarf fruit trees or dwarf fruit trees. You do not want to get a full-size fruit tree unless you have a lot of people who want to eat your fruit and you have tons and tons of space. So that does it for fruit. Just read the slide later. It's all the information is there. Vegetables also, I love growing vegetables. That's a picture of my vegetable garden up on the upper right corner. This slide tells you the difference between cool season, warm season, not the difference, but the plants seeds that need to be planted at different times. It's very, very useful. But the most useful thing on this slide, I think, is the last columns, which are vegetables for alkaline soil. So if you're not an experienced vegetable grower, start with these lists because they will work here and these plants will grow in our alkaline soil. The one thing that's not listed here, that if you like rhubarb loves white rock. So plant some rhubarb. It's really delicious and healthy. You might notice that I've got raised beds here. Our soil was horrible. You know, I did get it soil tested 50 years ago when we moved here. Hasn't gotten a whole lot better, even though I've been amending it for a long time, until I put those raised beds in and I could fill them with really good stuff. So I really like raised beds. Also, if you put hardware cloth on the bottom, you keep the gophers out, which is also really useful here. The other thing I use a lot, I use netting to keep some of the things like squirrels off of my cucumbers. I also use shade cloth in the summer when it's really, really hot. For example, over my raspberries, if I don't shade them, they get sun scald and they're just worthless. Put shade cloth. I have like a tent thing that goes over mine. In the summer, at the planting time, I use walls of water around my tomatoes. You can plant them earlier. The walls of water keep them warmer through some of those cold nights that you get in May still. And I've tested it by putting little thermometers in there to see how warm it is. It gets really nice and toasty in there, and the tomatoes just love it. Got to take them off by about June 1st because they'll also roast the plant if you leave it when it gets really hot. Okay, let's see if I've been, the other thing to be aware of, and we've talked about this when we were talking about soils, is that vegetables benefit from different nutrients at different times. They need nitrogen to grow, phosphorus to bloom and set fruit, and potassium for good root growth and water transport within the plant. So you need balance of your nutrients. If you have plants that are going like crazy, they may be getting too much nitrogen and not enough of the other nutrients. So it's really important to think about balancing what you're feeding your plants. Okay, my last thing that doesn't have beautiful flowers on it is about turf, because nobody else mentioned it, and I think it's really important. Most of us have some area in our yard where we want something like grass that we grew up with. And again, I'm not going to read this to you because it's boring. So you can read it yourself. There's a reference at the bottom. You can read more about that from that particular source. One thing that I did want to mention, because, you know, sometimes we don't think about the fact that maybe we don't need turf everywhere. And I've got up on the right-hand corner, I've got ground cover. That's what I use as mulch against my back shady fence underneath the shrubs, which is, grass would never grow there anyway. And I've got these shrubs and I use ground cover. That's ajuga and lamium with some grape hyacinths peeking up between them. I really like the thought of ground cover sometimes in place of either mulch or grass. And the other thing I have in my yard is we had I'll talk about this later when I get to my re-landscaping example, but in my front, I have a wild grass meadow and it's beautiful. So if you don't have grass that you actually need to have kids play on or you need to walk through, think about some meadow grasses. All righty. Oh, let's see, where am I?
One more. Just
One more. Oh, right. Here we
So
go.
this is my grass in my yard, and I'm all about birds and the bees and stuff, but, so these are dark-eyed juncos eating the seed heads off from my blue gram that I have.
And blue grama is one of the grasses that's listed on the previous slide. And also the juncos, the winter juncos just love grass seeds. They're all over my meadow as well. So, okay, there we go. All right, now we're going to talk about a re-landscaping example. I'm going to tell you all the mistakes I made, so you'll feel better if you go on and make some. So we moved in here in this almost 50 years ago. We bought this little home planning house in White Rock, and I had one child, small child, another one on the way, and my husband was working full time. I was working part time, and we came from places where we didn't know what New Mexico was like. So what did we do with our front yard? We bought sod, so we put it down so the kids have a place to play. We went up to the Forest Service and got permits to get some trees. So we went and, dug up some little tiny trees and brought them in and put this fir in the front yard, and it was this big, and it got kind of grew. I like crab apples, so we bought a crab apple tree and we planted it over the sidewalk. And the story was that one year my husband decided to pay my daughter a penny a piece for the crab apples that she picked up off the sidewalk. And I think it funded her college education. It was ridiculous. Penny a piece is definitely too much, even with inflation. So, and we also planted a maple tree because I grew up with maple trees. I love the color. I caught the wrong kind of maple, so it turned, it died. So at this point we had, this is now 2000, the year 2000, and I had this, in the front yard I had grass, Kentucky bluegrass, giant fir tree, which was diseased and too big for the space. This crabapple tree that was a nuisance. We had put a lot of gravel in places like the Parkway and other places we didn't know quite what else to do with. And I said, this is really bad. So I took the master gardening class. I learned about xeriscaping and I got converted. So I said, okay, the kids aren't home anymore. We got some money. Let's redo the front yard. We wanted to reduce the water. We wanted to make it look pretty. We want to get rid of these trees. We really wanted to attract birds, bees, and butterflies. And my husband said, you can do whatever you want as long as I don't have to mow. So I said, okay. So what do we do? The first thing he did was he stripped off all of the sod. Somebody wanted it. They actually carted it away for us. I don't know if it's still on their yard or not. Then we hired a contractor because we didn't feel we were capable of doing this kind of work ourselves. He prepared the soil. He removed the trees. That was the hard part. And then he terraced the yard a little bit. It looks kind of like it's flat, but it's not really. It was enough of a slope that we could get 2 different layers, which, because we wanted to save all the water that was coming down. We didn't want to just roll off into the street. So we terraced the front yard. We put a berm kind of along where the sidewalk is and then around a little bit corner so that the slope was a little bit like that, diagonally from the west to the east and then down to the street. So the theory was to collect all the water that we could. I would plant lower water needs shrubs and perennials. And we also wanted a drip. Up until then, we had just been running these long hoses with the little, those sprinklers, that would crawl along. Okay. And then I would use mulch to conserve water. I'd learned all this stuff. I was going to do it all right. So, so we did. So we went ahead and you can see the lower picture. This was in the fall. And then the lower picture was the next spring. So I actually designed the garden and did all the plantings. I had 4 areas. The lowest area, which is between the street and the sidewalk, I had the contractor bring in these giant pieces of flagstone, and I left holes in between to put ground cover roses. And the theory was that the water would, whatever rain we got would go down and would collect in the cracks between the stones, and it would stay there so that the plants would get fed. that way, as well as with the drip that's going underneath. Okay, so that was that section. The next section, which is mulched with pecan shells, which was also fun because we have fresh pecan shells. The birds come in and they eat every tiny little piece of pecan that it can find. That was a lot of enjoyment for about the first, I don't know, couple months. And that was planted mostly with perennials. And then there's another little sidewalk that has in the center, it's got where I was going to plant all native shrubs. And I also put in a couple of pretty rocks. And then behind that, you can see I made sort of it's not really a wall, it's like a tumble down wall to separate the two different layers of the terrace. And then above that, I planted my meadow. And you can see in this picture, it's covered with shade cloth because I wanted the seeds are in there and they've been planted, and I've been watering them just carefully, and I'm hoping that they'll sprout. Okay, so that was May. And then this was August. And I was so pleased because I just love my meadow. I just loved having that little bit of, I don't know, just wildness up in my front yard. And the perennials took off like gangbusters. And unfortunately, the shrubs did as well. I planted things that were probably a mistake. I planted a couple of Apache plumes, and they spread by runners. And if they get any water at all, they're way too happy. So I had to pull that out. And then the other thing I planted was Russian sage, which has become one of my least favorite plants because it spreads a bazillion ways. So I had to get rid of that one too. So I'm kind of still at this point, I'm still working on that area. I haven't quite figured out exactly what I want. I also put in an ornamental grass that was not native, and it just looked wrong there too. So that went. So it's okay. I'm telling you this because it's okay to make mistakes, even though you've had the class, and you think you know exactly what you're doing. You've got the books. I have most of those books that are there. I went through them carefully and I still screwed up. It's okay.
Experience.
Oh, this is a good time to talk about one thing I really recommend, particularly if you're going to redo your lawn. Get a spreadsheet, and in your spreadsheet have a column, common name, scientific name, when you planted it, and then comments. And keep it up to date because it's really useful. I've got over 100 plants in my front yard now. At different ones. I mean, not individual plants, like 5 roses. And I've also either removed or killed 30 boxes. Sorry.
I can't hear anything.
Okay. Just now. Oh, okay. This is the resources. These are the books. These are the ones that are actually available from, most of them are from the library, but these are all, those are all library ones? Okay. And then, why am I can't get to the next? Oh, I, this one.
Will all be available. Oh, there you go.
Yep.
Continual update.
Yeah, and then these are the websites. As Janine told you, go to our website, the Master Gardener website's got lots of information. And then the thing that's marked underneath the lamg.org thing that's called Judith Phillips Xeriscape Workshop. She came here and gave us a workshop at one time, and that is her list of plants that she thinks are good for this particular area. You can get that, it's a PDF file, you can download off that. It wasn't copyrighted, so it's okay for us to have it there. Okay. Question.
Just a few other websites, and Denise and I are very different, although we seem very the same. I don't have a lick of brain on my right side. And so I went to the internet and I found like pre-planned gardens. Okay. This is on one of those websites. And so you can find, this was my process. Here's the garden I want to plant. It's up at the top of my part of the demo garden. Here is the list of what Waterwise had in stock. Here is what I needed to fill. And then I bought plants and I labeled, okay, this one's gonna go where D is on the, because I don't do design. So. All right, questions? No questions? Yes,
I'm gonna, throw out the two of these favorite things. My neighbor has, mountain top, and the only thing in the yard right now is cheapgrass, ragweed, and mountain rose, and not even they. I just planted sage and chamisa, just to have a pollinator garden back there, just to, outgrow the cheapgrass. How is the Russian sage gonna escape? Make sure you repeat her question.
Oh, yeah.
last weekend.
Okay, the question was, I have a place that is fully weeded. And if I just plant chamisa and Russian sage in that space, will they out bully the weeds that are already there? Give it a try. Can't hurt.
What do they? Is that what?
I don't think they, well, they won't really escape. If you planted a Siberian elm, I'd worry about it escaping, but those things, the chamisa may go a little ways, but not,
let's see.
yeah, but
Oh, yeah, Catman.
Catman.
Yeah.
And it's pretty and a little greasy, but
yeah, but it will need more. Catmint will need a little bit more water than it will need some water. A little bit. Go to the center of the garden and plant some there and see what happens.
Yeah.
It's an experiment.
Other
Okay.
questions, comments? Yeah.
I was told by, I don't know what his title was, but he used to work for High Country Gardens when they had a physical store in Santa Fe. That if you're looking at the size that a tree will grow, that really it's about 3/4 of what the catalog says. So it's never gonna get as big as that, as what the official information says. Is that, have you found that to be true?
I have found
Repeat that, sorry.
somewhat, yeah, the question is, she's told that the catalog might tell you a tree will grow to a certain size, but here possibly in Los Alamos County, it won't get as big as that says. So maybe that's true for things that I don't know. My own experience is with dwarf fruit trees. Semi-dwarf fruit trees, and they get bigger than promised.
I think it depends.
So it probably depends. I don't know what particular tree he was talking about.
Yeah, it depends on the tree and it depends on whether it gets water. I have a sumac in my backyard that was there when I moved in and it's this big. The ones in my front yard, which get water, are 8 foot tall.
It's 3 leaves.
3-leaf sumac. So it depends. And I would say if you get like the catalogs in the back, not that I'm pushing plants in the Southwest, but if you're looking at a catalog from the East Coast, it probably is going to be different. If you're looking at,
What you meant.
yeah, if you're
Oh.
looking from a catalog locally or, yeah, then.
My
then it
guess
could be small.
also that if you have soil other than what most of us have, that's probably true. If you're buying something from the East Coast, yeah. Questions? Were there any? Oh,
I have a question about Austrian versus Congress. Who would you want?
all right. What's the difference between Austrian and Ponderosa pine, and why would you prefer the Austrian pine?
So I would say they both have long needles, right? But the Austrian pine grows pretty fast. It's pretty tolerant and you can cut them up. They don't get as tall as a ponderosa pine, right? The ponderosa pines are, well, I would say that they will be just fine. Yeah.
Were there any chat questions?
Ruth only wanted to say that some shrubs don't read their tags.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but it's a good starting point.
Other questions, comments? You have a lot of master gardeners in here, so if we don't know, someone else in the room might know. Oh, they're on the back table.
Oh.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Oh,
One more,
sure.
use your knowledge. I'm looking for a perennial. It could be a bush or a bush or a perennial that has foliage in fall, but it would be nice summer too. That will grow in shade and that is deer resistant.
Next question. Foliage. I mean, red foliage.
But that's only red in the, if you want to,
I mean,
How about if-
How about example,
The smoke tree.
Yeah, smoke tree.
Smoke tree.
That's red.
but that's gonna get really big.
Yeah.
That's not,
Yeah.
It's right, and it doesn't change, but it's gorgeous.
I have some of those back where I have but I've got a lot of the things that are in there that are okay. I have them in.
have you tried a sand cherry?
I, no,
Mine's in the sun, but I don't know, it might grow in the shade. It's definitely red,
yeah, yeah.
and it doesn't get enormous. They're,
Right now I have 40, and that's great.
yeah. The question was for a tree that is deer resistant, has red foliage, and will grow in the shade.
Or
Not a tree.
A shrub,
or-
I'm sorry, a shrub or a perennial.
So, small and
I,
I've done, but it's red in fall. I was.
no, it's just because that's deer resistant.
Yes.
Are there any
They don't
ajugas that are red all year round?
There's some ajugas that are burgundy. That's a ground cover. That's little guy.
I had the deer just go for, I tried planting the new good resistant fire.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So why don't we-
I'm in White Rock, so we don't have deer problems so much.
Why don't we close up, so if
Okay.
people want to leave, they can, and if you don't want to leave, you don't have to, so.
Okay.
Anything else?
All right.
Well, thank you all for coming and listening to us.